Hey guys, welcome to Boxing Squad for boxing news and views from around the internet. Heavyweight contender Dillian Whyte has changed his mind about a rematch with Joseph Parker, something he hadn't been willing to consider until now. So what I'll do is I'll get to his comments on social media, then a couple of thoughts about what's really going on here, because it could be one of two things. It could be him chasing some headlines, some positive publicity, but it also could be a reality of his current situation, because Dillian Whyte is in the business of Dillian Whyte. He wants to be a pay-per-view fighter, maximize his purses, and that could be a big part of it. Get back on pay-per-view. So starting off with some of the comments on social media. So this started from Joseph Parker actually talking to Derek Chisora on Twitter, saying, "We've been trying to make this fight for 2 years now, so let's fight. Simple, but now you're as silent as Dillian Whyte avoiding a rematch. What's going on?" So we're not going to cover that Chisora situation. Parker clearly and desperately trying to get that fight. But in pops Dillian Whyte responding to that tweet, saying, "Anytime, anywhere, mate." And Joseph Parker responds with 100. And on Instagram, on a page that I follow, Heavyweight Boxing UK, Whyte jumps into the comments. You can see here on screen, they were covering that tweet that I just covered. And Whyte, in response to a comment, says, "This time he will get knocked out." Further down, he says, "Am the can man who even want it can get it. Trust me." So Dillian Whyte now seemingly wanting a rematch with Joseph Parker. And I'll just, for a little bit of context, so the pair fought in July 2018. We know that Whyte won a somewhat controversial fight with a head clash, dropping Parker early in the fight, and it was ruled a knockdown as opposed to a head clash. Parker, he was dropped later in the fight, and then Whyte dropped in the final round, barely survives, hangs on to get the win. Joseph Parker has been desperate to get that rematch, but his calls for a rematch with Whyte have fallen, as he basically says, on deaf ears. Dillian Whyte has been relatively silent on the call-outs over the past 18 months or so. But that's because immediately after the fight, when they were asked about would you have this as a rematch, his coach Mark Tibbs, as well as Dillian Whyte, said, "No, we won. It's time to move on. We've beaten Joseph Parker. There is nothing left to prove here. We're going to be fighting other guys in the heavyweight division. We've been there and done that." So until now, Joseph Parker has been calling for it, and it has really got no response from Dillian Whyte. But now, as we're hearing, he says he wants the rematch anytime, anywhere. He's going to knock him out, and he's the can man. And Dillian Whyte often says he's the can man, but sometimes that does come with an asterisk because there's certain conditions and yada, yada, yada. But obviously, there's a couple of ways that I look at this sort of thawing on this position from Whyte, who is now sort of saying, Joseph Parker, yeah, let's do it. One thing could be, it's for good press. And I think it's already generated a good result publicly. People are talking about it. I'm talking about it. There's been stories about it. People are sort of looking at this from Whyte and sort of going, actually, a Parker rematch, that could be a good fight. And it would be. But you could also look at this in the sort of situation that Whyte's been in since July 2019. He fought Rivas, he beat him. Then it emerged there was an alleged performance-enhancing drugs test, a failed result. And that situation hasn't been cleared up. Dillian Whyte has had a lot of bad press. The whole sort of situation was revealed, even though the process with UCAD hasn't sort of played out. So there's a cloud hanging over Whyte, and he's limited in what he can say. So he's had a lot of bad press, and often when his name is mentioned, the performance-enhancing drug test, that is brought into the conversation, or some element of it. So something like this could be to get his name out there again in a more positive light, in a way that sort of doesn't sort of bring up what has been happening in recent months. And I think largely it has been greeted mostly positively by fans. A lot of people weren't necessarily desperate for a rematch immediately after that fight, but a lot of people would still want to see it. I myself, I didn't necessarily have a burning desire to see it immediately, but I figured at some point after Dillian Whyte loses, he's probably going to go back to that fight because it would always be there, similar to the Derek Chisora fight. So this could be a situation where Dillian Whyte is trying to milk some good press, trying to move on from the PED-related scandal that he's been sort of ensconced in. And we don't know when that's going to play out, and I know that there's already going to be some comments in the comment section where people will be saying, where's the B sample? UCAD is yet to report its findings, so we'll have to see where all that goes. And the other side of the coin could be, and maybe this is more a reality of Whyte's situation now, because he has had this whole situation with, post the Rivas fight, his stock is down generally with fans, and they may not be able to go back immediately into a pay-per-view event unless there is the right opponent. So they're talking about a tune-up fight of some sort in December that could either be in the United States or in Saudi Arabia. We'll have to see what happens there, but Whyte is not banned from fighting at the moment. He can fight. There is no restrictions on what he can do. Until UKAD comes back with their final results, he can basically do what he wants. And given his current situation, looking at a Joseph Parker rematch, and that could be for, say, early 2020, say in March or April, that might be one of the most viable opportunities for him to actually make some good money. With his stock down and having Joseph Parker, he knows that they will be able to make money off that fight. They did over 400,000 buys in July 2018. And when you consider that when Whyte, just on his own name, not with another star, so when he fought Chisora and when he fought Joseph Parker, strong pay-per-view numbers. When he fought Oscar Rivas, there was a dip. It was just under 300,000. And they have to have, clearly, to get the bigger numbers, another name, another dance partner, someone with some profile. And this could be another reason that Parker could be back in the mix, because with his stock down at the moment, if they get another sort of name like a Rivas, who's a good fighter, but not necessarily a big star in the division in terms of fan support, his pay-per-view numbers could drop. So if he can go back to the well, have a rematch with Joseph Parker, he could get back in the Dillian Whyte business, which is have a pay-per-view, be that sort of second top heavyweight at Matchroom on pay-per-view, on Sky, making money for Matchroom, making money for Sky, and clearly himself. So this actually could be something that he's looking at in terms of the options right now, going, this could be the best of the lot that is available. And Dillian Whyte has prioritized making money in his career. The pay-per-view with Rivas, the pay-per-view with Parker, the pay-per-view with Chisora at the end of last year. He could have taken other fights, eliminators that were offered, but they went their own way, went on pay-per-view, and they made money for Dillian Whyte. So clearly, being a prize fighter, money is important to Whyte. And even if he clears this whole UKAD situation and he gets reinstated as the WBC interim champion and obviously the mandatory position, his mandatory shot at the WBC belt holder could be as late as February 2021. So he would still need to be fighting next year, regardless of that mandatory slot. And what's he going to do ahead of that? Well, he'd probably want to have a pay-per-view. So this is why Parker sets as a good option for Dillian Whyte right now. And I can understand why he's thought on that position of not wanting that rematch originally. But now with things closing in, the whole situation and his stock being down with fans, it seemingly has bubbled to the top and looks like it could be a viable option. And it's a good fight. I think a lot of us would want to see that rematch run back. Regardless of this whole situation that Whyte is sort of ensconced in at the moment, I think people would want to see the rematch. And it probably, out of the guys he could fight, they're in the same stable, it's easy to make, it's a decent fight too. What do you make of the situation and the about face by Dillian Whyte? Is it just for headlines, chasing a good headline instead of some of the bad that he's had? Or is it a viable option now, the most viable for a big payday for Whyte and, of course, for Joseph Parker? Drop a comment, loud and often. Hit like, hit subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, boxing_squared. I'm out.